Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Ride Mechanic channel. How the heck are you doing today? Alright, today's show, I kind of wanted to do one subject, but then I wanted to do a different one, then a different one, then I thought about it, I'm like, you know what, I just kind of want to do everything. So I wanted to look through some emails and answer emails that people have been sending to me, so let's do that today.
Now get ready, here we go.
Okay, so one of the things on my channel is I do ask people to like, subscribe, email me, do all that stuff downstairs. It does help me out. I do appreciate it. Well, one of the things is you guys email me all the time. You guys email me questions that you have. Now, a lot of this is questions that you didn't want to post onto YouTube, which is understandable in some cases, but a lot of them are just questions that are genuine. You want a more focused answer, something that's just a little bit outside of the realm of a YouTube comment. So I take the time and I do try to answer everyone's questions that comes through the channel. Some I'm very honest and straightforward. Some I can answer, some I can't. If I have knowledge in the subject and can give you some general information, I'm more than happy to do that. But what I realized is that I've got a lot of people asking questions, and as I'm answering these emails and giving people answers, I'm just like, these aren't the only people that have these questions. I bet you a lot of people have questions just like this. So every once in a while I'll do a video like this where I go through and answer email questions, and some might be fact-based, some might be opinion-based, some might be just the mechanics of the ride, some might be review of other videos. If I watch other videos in this one, I'm not trying to steal anybody's video or anything like that. They're typically used as reference because people ask me to say, hey, what's going on in this video? Then I check it out. So let's get into some of these questions. The first one is about wooden roller coasters. Basically, they go on to say that they wanted to talk about roller coasters, wooden roller coasters, and you see them less and less. GCI still makes them, but I don't know how much they make of them. It goes down to saying that, like, nowadays everything is getting RMC and Titan track, and in case you haven't wondered by now, it's like I won't use people's email addresses or names or anything like that. So if you're in fear of me using some of your information, it's like I don't do that sort of stuff. I scrub things and keep them clean in case you haven't figured that part out. So it ends with, I often find wooden roller coasters impressive construction. Do you think that they will stop, or do you have any idea how they can continue to exist? So the body of the email basically goes on in kind of a pointed fashion to say that, you know, we're losing wooden roller coasters. And if you guys haven't heard me on Side Friction podcast, one of the things that we talk about all the time, Bob and Greg are adamant wood roller coaster fans, and it's like every time the news comes up, it feels like we're losing another wooden roller coaster, a true wooden roller coaster, to a RMC or something like that, to a steel layover. Now, we call it steel layover because there's very rare wooden hybrid roller coasters. Hybrid is steel and wood at the same time. So over here at Worlds of Fun, they opened up Zambini Zinger, if I'm saying that name right. Anyways, it is a hybrid wooden roller coaster because the majority of the track is wood. It is a standard wooden roller coaster, but some parts have a steel overlay where it goes around some high stress areas, has to go up and stay really close to the structure. So you're on wood and then suddenly you're on steel, then you're back to wood. That's a true hybrid. When a track gets a full RMC layover, that's pretty much a steel roller coaster with a wooden support trellis. It's not really a hybrid, it's a steel overlay. That's what I call it. So again, the question is, do you think that they will stop or ever cease to exist? So what you're up against is history here. There's a lot of history and a lot of love for wooden roller coasters. Wooden roller coasters are iconic. When you picture amusement parks, you typically picture a wooden roller coaster in the background. That's what a lot of people think of, is that wooden roller coaster. But as we get on in days, we find out that, well, the problem is that the mindset's changing, that there's not a lot of people that find wooden coasters that exhilarating anymore. And the reason is because they can now make these RMC contraptions, these other companies, and do this other stuff where they can get people on a lot more aggressive track layout. So typically RMC does stuff where it's like you're rehashing an old wooden roller coaster and you're putting a steel overlay on it. So now you can do a corkscrew and a loop and all sorts of stuff like that. Well, the old wooden roller coaster is like an out and back, like a racer or something that's a very classic wooden roller coaster. Those are starting to go by the wayside because not only do they cost a fair chunk of money to make, just like an RMC would cost, but now you need a crew of people to maintain it. And that is a rough thing. It's also a dying art form to take care of wooden roller coasters. There are parks out there, like I'm going to be going on my trip really shortly when this video comes out. I'm going to be going on my trip soon. I'm going to be visiting Knoebels and a couple places like that where they have an art form and they take care of their wooden roller coasters. Now, that is not just a carpenter throwing nails into it or screwing wood screws into things. Like there is a specific process to take care of wooden roller coasters. That skill of maintaining wooden roller coasters is starting to dwindle. And then you have parks trying to cut money out as we enter further into this recession. Parks try to cut more and more money. They cut it out of materials, they cut it out of labor, they cut out everything else. And when it takes you a crew of 8 to 9 people to open up a wooden roller coaster to do the track and train inspection and then a crew of people to inspect all the wood, when it takes all that people in the morning time, that's a lot of money. So I think we're going to see wooden coasters dwindle down, way down in numbers. Maybe not necessarily disappear, but they're going to go way down in numbers. And then it's going to be few and far between for parks that decide to spend their capital money and open up a true wooden roller coaster, because that means they have to have the infrastructure in place to take care of that wooden roller coaster. If they're not used to it already, that's going to be really hard. If it's a park with all steel roller coasters and they suddenly want to open up a wood roller coaster, they've got to get everybody from other parks. They got to have them come out and they've got to source in the information and determine how to take care of that roller coaster. If you're a park that already has a bunch of wooden roller coasters, it's no big deal. You could just add one because you already have the skill, knowledge, and mindset there to maintain that. So I think we're going to see wooden coasters dwindle down, not quite go away, but I think we're going to see them dwindle way down until everyone gets tired of most people call a hybrid roller coaster, until people get tired of doing that. And then they're going to want to start to see steel again. They want to get that old feeling back in there where you just get some little airtime pops and stuff like that. But I don't think you're going to see a rekindling and explosion of these wood coasters coming back up. So I have to say it's kind of like a dying art right now. It's something that's going to go just down further until you're left like with historic landmark style rides. And even then we're starting to see those come out too. So I think it's on its way out, but it's one of the things that's a staple of the industry. I don't think we're going to see it happen for a long period of time. All right, moving on to the next question. Hey Ryan, this green track is Rapterra at Kings Dominion in Virginia. It's a B&M coaster, and all the states that get B&M, the track comes from Batavia, I don't, probably not saying that name right, Ohio steel plant for B&M, but I did not know the steel plant installs stators, LSM or LIM, whatever they are called. I thought this stuff was added to the track by a different company at track installation. So this picture right here is one that was taken while they were constructing the ride. And yeah, the teal greenish looking track is from the B&M place. That's where they do manufacture all the track here in the US. I think, is that Claremont Steel? I think it's Claremont Steel that actually does the fabrication of the track. What they're looking at is they're saying, hey, you see these boxes right here. You see these boxes on the side that have cables installed and they've got stators on the top of this. They're like, these came off the truck this way. I didn't know that plant does that. Well, it's probably not the plant that does that. It's probably not that steel company that does that. Steel company is in charge of making the steel. They're in charge of doing the plating and the coating on it. But they're probably not putting this stuff on. What they do is they take all these prints and they hire it out to a subcontractor. The subcontractor is the one that comes in and puts all this stuff on. It's typically an electrical company that does this stuff because it's junction boxes, it's wires, it's cables. They're really good with that sort of stuff. B&M has specified already in the prints that these boxes are to have X amount of slack in the cable. Those big droops underneath the cable right there, these big loops down at the bottom, these guys are necessary for as stuff moves around and shakes and rattles, that stuff can just gently sway underneath there and not put any extra stress onto those wires. That's an important thing. So what they do is they have a set of plans, and it says we need all these junction boxes, or maybe the junction boxes and stators have come in a different shipment, but we need them installed with this cabling and these connections and all this sort of stuff. And a independent electrical contractor will come up and say, okay, and they throw their name in and they say, okay, we can install all the electrical for you, sure, no problem. And it might say on all the track pieces, we'll install the electrical for $200,000. And it's like, okay. And now that's typically done at that plant where that stuff is. Now that is the smart way to do it. Now I say that's smart because when you're doing the construction of these things, once it's done at that plant and says, okay, it's ready to ship out, you could put it on a truck and say, ship it to the park. This is what we did with a lot of stuff. We shipped it to the park. And when it showed up to the park, our contractor that was going to be doing all the electrical work for the ride was also the one to show up and put on the junction boxes and stuff like that. For our Skyrocket 2, we put on the junction boxes, we put on the stators, we bolted everything together, and then the electrical guys simply just ran the conduit and terminated the wires on the inside. So it was kind of a joint effort, much cheaper for us to do it this way. If they weren't smart about it, it would be a subcontractor next to that steel plant that is doing the work on all these track pieces and then shipped out to the park. And then another subcontractor at the park that does the final wiring and installation. Why is that not smart? Because contractor A that did all this stuff you see here in this picture, contractor A that did all this says, okay, we're done, everything's set to the print, there you go. Contractor B is going to get here, and anytime they have any sort of problem whatsoever, what they do is they say, oh, contractor A messed this up, that's their problem, so it's taking more time for us, so it's going to cost you more just because we're taking more time to do this. And what you get is you get contractors fighting with each other about a potential problem, or it might even be a lack of understanding in the print. So for continuity wise, you always want the same contractor doing either the pre-installation and all the installation at the park, or you want him doing it all there at the park, or traveling. If the contractor is good with traveling, okay, yeah, travel to Claremont Steel and bolt all that stuff on there. They have truck shipments sewing up. They could work on everything there at Claremont Steel for a week. And then, okay, that gets loaded up on the truck, shipped to the park. And then that contractor comes back to where the park is. And then when the stuff actually gets installed and placed, then that contractor goes out and finishes what they've already started. That is the smartest thing to do if you're going to use it in two remote locations. But we preferred to do things on site. So it was ship everything to the site, to our park, and then we installed everything there ourselves. Electrical guys only want to run electrical. That is a problem you're going to run into. Like, why would that be a problem, Ryan? I'm glad you asked that question. Thanks for using my name. I appreciate that. So what happens is you got, okay, we put all this stuff together. It's like, great, okay, we're going to hang the conduit and we're going to run this up here. And then they're going to be like, what about the stators? It's like, what about the stators? Why are the stators up? Well, they're not bolted to the track. So bolt them to the track. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We're not mechanical guys. We're electrical guys. So you won't touch the hardware for the stators? Nope, that's a mechanical. You're going to need a fitter to do that. And you got to have a mechanical guy out doing that. It's like, okay, but you could mount all the hardware to the junction boxes on the side of the track. Oh yeah, we'll put all this hardware in for that and do all that, but you won't touch the hardware to the electrical stators to the track, but you'll do the electrical boxes to the track. Yep, we're not going to touch the stators. Nope, we're not going to do that. It's like, okay. So you do need to find a company that makes sure that the scope of the work is well defined, that you're going to have to touch everything here, and though you might not have to anchor those bolts fully, you got to at least get them in there snug, or maybe a little, battery operated buzz drill and hammer the hardware on really quick, just to at least pin it down and get it in place. Because those stators, those are expensive. Like, you don't want to mess those things up. The ones we were using, I believe, those slimline stators like that, if those are intrasys, I'm not sure if those are or not. I believe the cheap ones were like $8,000, about $8,000, and this was 10 years ago, right? So it's probably a lot more now. But the cheap ones were like $8,000, and the expensive ones were like $14,000 or $15,000. So you don't want to mess those things up. It's another reason why you shouldn't transport track with stators on them, because man, if the track, something happened to it and something slid or moved around, you could damage $100,000 worth of equipment in one shot, and those stators might not be on the shelf depending on their configuration. Next question about Top Thrill 2. Well, look at that, a Top Thrill 2 question. Let's see, we were waiting in line the other day for Top Thrill 2 and noticed something. The ride had just opened and experienced a rollback. You mean that thing they said was never going to happen? That thing? Or the one that they said happens every cycle? It's not a rollback, that's a swing. Anyways, digress. It didn't make it over the top hat. It came to a complete stop at the start of the launch track to rest in the launch sequence. They had to start it over again. So the question is, why would it come to a complete stop instead of just giving it one more swing to get over? That's a fair question. Okay, that's a pretty good question. This is one of the reasons why I like answering emails for people, because yeah, a lot of people right now are probably like, yeah, I've always had that. Why couldn't they do that? So instead of it swinging out on the front tower, going 1, back tower, the spike, 2, and then up front tower up and over is 3. So we're going to say on swing 3, it does a rollback, and it comes backwards on itself. Okay, it's done a rollback. At that point, it comes to a stop. And they're like, why wouldn't you just say, we're going to accelerate it again in reverse, back up, and this would be swing 4, and then give it another shot going forward at swing 5. When they designed it to go up and over on swing 3. So once it leaves the stators at the bottom of the ride, once it leaves those stators on swing 3, that ride goes into stop mode, because it says, okay, stop. So all the stators essentially ground to their braking resistors, so in case the train rolls back, it comes back and stops as quickly as possible. Now you say, well, why don't they just change the drive and have the profile weighting in reverse and basically duplicate, maybe swing profile number 2. So if it came back down and hit it, it would just reaccelerate it again. So when they designed the ride, they said profile 3 or swing 3, it's going to go up and over, and that's what's going to happen. And that's what it should do. And we've given it enough power, we've given it enough speed to go up and over that top hat. So then you say, well, what happens if it doesn't make it over the top hat? Well, this is where the manufacturer and programming alike go, there must be something wrong. So the manufacturer raised the red flag up and say, if it doesn't make it over the top hat, there must be something wrong. There's an inefficiency inside the drive system. There's a malfunction inside the train. Something has prevented that train from going up and over the top because we gave it enough speed, we gave it enough power to go up and over the top, but it didn't do it. So therefore, there must be a problem with the power, or there must be a problem with the speed, i.e. like there's excessive drag in the train for some reason. So they said, problem, stop. Stop the ride. There's got to be a problem because we gave it all the correct inputs and it didn't make it over. So that's the main reason why they say, okay, we're not going to go into profile 4 and just go backwards again and then 5 and then try to go up and over. Because if there is a problem in the drive system, that could damage the drive even further. So they don't want to do that. And if there's a problem in the train, that could cause some sort of catastrophic failure in the train if it's not caught. So that's one of the things they say, okay, go out there, reset it, bring it back, and then try to launch it again. that point. Now, one of the things the mechanics do when they show up to these calls is they don't just blindly reset it and fire it off again. They talk with the operations and they look at the system. They look for the system. Is there any faults on this thing? It's like, oh, no, it does produce a fault when it rolls back because the system shuts off. So it's like, okay, it has that fault. But before that, was there any faults? No. They'll talk with the operators and say, hey, did you guys notice any unusual noises? Any unusual sounds? Was there anything weird about this? No, there wasn't. Like, as they're recovering the train and bringing it back to the start position, they'll be looking at the train as well. So, well, is there anything wrong with it that we could see? Well, no, nothing wrong with it that we can see. Now, they've never had a problem. Most of the time it is something they can justify and say, oh, it didn't make it over the top because we did have a fault. The ride faulted right on swing 3 and it went up and it fell back down. It's like, okay, we had a fault. Or they say, like, it's really windy up there right now, and they look at the anemometer at the ride and like, oh yeah, look, the wind speed up there is 45 mile an hour. That's, yeah, it's not going to make it over the top. So they haven't had a reason to second guess things at all. But if it ever gave them a reason to second guess it, then instead of just relaunching the train, it's going to be a full evacuation, unload the ride altogether and get it empty before they can cycle the empty train back out there. That might be the procedure as it sits right now for some instances. For a lot, I believe the scenario is still just to check it, reset it, and then push it back out and fire it again, essentially. Swings 1, 2, 3, backing up and over the top. But that's my best reasoning I can use for that. Pretty much every ride I've done, if we have done a power profile and gotten it over the top hat or up the front tower or whatever it might have been, and it came backwards when we didn't expect it to be there. We expected it to go over, and then it showed up in a place we did not expect it to be. That's just grounds to like, okay, fault, stop the ride. Pretty much everything I've ever worked on programming for, that's the way it works. So it's a good question. All right, moving on to the next question. We're actually looking at the Premier Rides LSM launch programming over there at Alpenfury. This person's home park is Canada's Wonderland. Hey, I'm going to be visiting there soon. Very nice looking park. I can't wait to go. Let's see, they were looking at their Premier Skyrocket 3, and just today they had put on the trains on the track. Again, these emails are a little old. Trains are already on. They're actually cycling the ride right now. They had the Blue Train launch channel today. I was assuming they were programming the launch, but there were some weird things they did I was hoping I could shed some light on. When I got there, the trains were sitting on the transfer track midway through the launch tunnel, and after some time they pushed the train backwards a little bit and pushed it back a little bit more. I heard the LSMs firing, and then it stopped, and then they pushed it back a little bit, walked around a little bit more. About an hour and a half, I heard the LSMs again. They pushed it all the way back up to the transfer track and disconnected the back car. Then they pushed it all the way back to the start of the launch and left the front 2 cars sitting on the transfer, and then I'm assuming they went back on break because they didn't see anyone around anymore. So basically what they're working with there is that for Alpenfury, the transfer track for the ride actually sits inside the launch tunnel. It comes out of the station, goes down into the mountain, and then there's a launch, and in the middle of that launch tunnel is the transfer track that they use to take the trains on and off to service them. Makes sense because inside the mountain is a nice big area where it's nice covered and they can work on those trains. So what they're saying is that they were working on the train there, and then they were moving it a little bit, and then they were basically moving it backwards, and then they would roll the train back forward again onto the transfer track, and they kept moving it backwards, rolling it forward again onto the transfer track, and then moving it backwards, and then disconnecting the third coach, and then playing with that a little bit more. So they're asking, like, any idea what's going on there? So the moving back and forth just looks like, okay, they're just simply putting the train onto the transfer track. Transfer has a lot of programming around it where they need to make sure the train is fully sitting in that position. They tried it a bunch of times and then disconnected the third coach and then tried it some more. So what that is kind of what my brain goes to is they're thinking like, okay, we moved the train all the way onto the transfer track, and then we try to move the transfer track, and the ride says that the train is out of position, even though it's not, it's sitting there. So I'm wondering if they think it was a wrong count in the drive system. Because when it comes to these rides, the drive system produces a feedback exactly almost to the millimeter of where those trains are on the launch track. And then they use proximity sensors to verify. So they might take the nose of the train, which is typically what you count off of on one of those launch rides, and you might move it onto the transfer track, and it says, okay, once it gets to, make up a number, once it gets to 15,000 centimeters on the launch length, once it gets to 15,000 centimeters, we are going to stop the train there because that is transfer. Okay, great, 15,000 centimeters, train stops. And then it should have about 4 proximity sensors reading 2 on the nose, 2 on the tail, and then you have 2 outside of that on both sides. So the ride drive says the train's in the right spot, and then the proximity sensors verify, yep, train's in the right spot, and the other 2 say, yep, train's in the right spot. So 2 in the front, 2 in the back. Once you see the nose and the tail at the same time, you know you have the train. You put sensors just on the outside of that to make sure you don't have an erroneous reading. So if a train was too far back and there were sensors malfunctioning on the front, you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then a 5th one lit up in the back because it's like, oh, I still see the train. So it kind of sounds like to me they were having trouble with the train's position on the track. The ride would move it forward and stop it, and then some other safety system in the ride was saying, nope, train's not in position. And they're trying to transfer the train, basically. But the ride was preventing them from doing it because it's like, no, train's out of position. I'm not seeing it. So they had to get in there and say, okay, so this is like troubleshooting I would do. It's like, all right, well, you try a whole bunch of things and then eventually you're scratching your head so hard, like, you know what, let's just take off a coach, uncouple the coach, pull the vertical hitch pin out of the hitch bar, and then we'll just uncouple a coach and push it back. And then we'll try to transfer 2 coaches and then move that forward. Now, there's all sorts of things wrong there because once you move that train into position, the ride may say, yes, I have the front of the train, but then it might not know where the rear is. Or if you park the rear of the last coach on top of one of the other rake sensors, now the drive might say, I've got this train in 2 different spots. But then all the proximity sensors set along the track, you might have 2 in the front that read and the 2 in the back that are supposed to be lit up or high, they're not. So it might be confused. So it sounds like I don't think a tail sensor is off. The tail sensor is what's used on the track to verify position. I don't think a tail sensor was off on the drive. I think this was more like a wrong input to one of the proximity sensors. It can happen. They typically use those like yellow Turk proximity sensors where they screw the cable on the back. Well, it can happen where the cable's terminated, they get 2 of the wires backwards, and then the normally open signal is reading when you should have a normally closed signal. The ride might not care about it in one way, but when you switch it into transfer, it suddenly cares about that erroneous signal that's sitting there. So it could be something like that. But yeah, I think this whole thing basically boils down to a mismatch in the train position when they're in the transfer mode. Transfer has all sorts of weird logic around it. They're really tough to deal with. All the programming of a ride almost sits inside the transfer area. Not fun to deal with and troubleshoot. Next email, is this normal operation? Hey Ryan, I'd love to hear your take on this one. I know rapid boats have drain holes and are designed to operate with some water aboard, but would you consider this to be within normal operating limits? Let's see what this is. Okay. Let's see here. Alright, so this is a rapids ride. As you can see, the water here is down around the step down there at the bottom. Whose video is this? I can't. DJ Tony V. Okay. That's whose video this is, DJ Tony V. All right, so there's water around the step at the bottom. And if you look at their legs, it's like, yeah, it's kind of like halfway up their shins. Okay, now on rapids rides, on these tubs like this, you typically have a couple of drain holes. They're simply just a hole that goes straight through to the bottom. When you get doused with water, when you get a ton of water that comes right over the side of that thing, it basically lands inside of there and has to get back outside of the boat. One of the reasons is because the bladders can only produce so much buoyancy before there's a problem. What is that number? I don't know what that number is. But it's just one of those things. If an operator saw this as they pulled back into the station and the boat's full of water, the operators would not load that boat again. If they could sideline it, they would sideline the boat and call maintenance up and say, hey, more than likely what's going on here is the drains are clogged. So it's like, okay, they're clogged, come out. And then it's like we have to go out there and figure out what the deal is. We've gone out to ones on our rapids ride where there wasn't that much water in it, but there was a good 1.5 inches, 2 inches of water inside there. And there was park maps, because we still have paper park maps. There was park maps at the bottom, and they were covering the drain. They were covering both the drains, and they were preventing water from draining back out. Now, one thing I see here is it looks like, I wonder if someone's or multiple people's feet have covered the drain holes on there. I say, that's still a lot of water for that ride. It's like, that is still a lot of water. I don't know how that would happen in one cycle. Maybe it was plugged up. Maybe there's something on the bottom plugging those drain holes up, and they got in and already had 1.5 inches of water in it. And maybe they just got a couple of big waves in there and filled it up some more. That is definitely a lot of water, though. I'd be kind of worried about this lift mechanism after a while, because it's meant to lift up a lot of weight, but I don't know about... I guess all that extra water would be fine. I'd love to see all this stuff shift. Could it shift? It has to be a lot of water suddenly over to one side. Looks like they had fun. Definitely think that's just some drain holes plugged in the bottom, whether it's somebody plugging it themselves, or it's something like some park maps or receipts or something like that stuck in those drain holes down there. Either way, I wouldn't say it's good to operate like that. As soon as operations probably saw that, they probably did something about it, assuming those people weren't just covering the holes with their feet. Okay, here's another one. Cedar Point Maverick. Can't wait to ride that coaster. I hope that's open when I go there. Attached a photo took while the ride was stopped in the back of the station. I've been going to Cedar Point for years, and I've noticed this. Haven't noticed this until before this year. I'm not sure what the correct term is, but I guess it would be the coupling mechanism of the trains. The top of this washer is basically hammered over on the top of the nut and the bolt. I'm not sure exactly why this would be this way. Looks a tad concerning. Nothing against the Cedar Point crew. I'm sure they absolutely know what they're doing. Could you explain the purpose of this? Alright, what do we got here? Yes, this is a hitch assembly on the ride. Yep, you see there's the road wheels right there. If I got my perspective looking correctly, we're looking from the top of the coach down, basically. Alright, so this is would be a road wheel. And then this is the coach right here on top. That's the coach in front. And this is the coach that they are, I'm guessing, riding in this particular picture. This is the hitch assembly right here. That's basically a giant spherical rod end in there. And then this is what they're talking about right here. They say, look, it looks like a washer is folded over. Let me see if I can zoom in on that. I can, kind of. All right, they're saying, look, it looks like the washer is folded over. And yes, it is, kind of. So this is a nut right here, and I believe most Intamin rides, this is actually has a snap ring on it. I mean, the ones I dealt with had snap rings on there. And this is a locking plate. That's the name of them. It's a locking plate that goes on there. So before that nut was put on, there is a giant stainless steel plate of metal that's put on underneath that nut. If we look at this picture, right here, you can kind of make out a bolt right there in the back. Maybe it's not easiest to see. Zoom out a little bit, kind of get a better idea. But that little bolt right there, that's actually holding that locking plate. And what it's designed to do is that once you have tightened that whole assembly down and those nuts are the tension that they need to be, wherever it's easiest to inspect, because it's a nice round washer that sits out there, wherever it's easiest to inspect, you take that thing and you fold it over the top part of the nut. Now what you've done is you've made a mechanical locking washer, essentially, that's holding the nut. So now on a lot of stuff I've dealt with, they've had the nut, which is a nylock or nylon locking ring on side of it. You have a snap ring, which is also retaining the nut. But then your first line of defense is this locking plate that goes behind it. You fold that over just like they did in the picture right there. And this is all per the manufacturer. Nothing homegrown or anything about this. You fold that guy over and you pound it down flat on the side of that nut, and then it can't move, essentially. It holds the torque captive inside that nut. There's one on the other side typically as well. The other side, depending on the hitch design, I can't see it on here, it might be a pin to where the pin is actually being held captive one way, not with a locking washer, just like between two machined surfaces, and the head of the pin locks in that way. But this is basically an extra form of retention on that nut to keep it all together locked into place. This is a very common thing to do. Lots of ride manufacturers use all sorts of stuff. There is, on the Vacomas I worked on, two tab washers. They used them all over everything. One tab, it looks like an L. One tab would fold over the side of the steel that was just like on the edge, and then the other side of the tab would fold, you typically fold it backwards up against the head. So like all over the hardware on a lot of Vacoma rides, you have these two tab washers that lock just like that. This doesn't have the second tab, it has the bolt down at the bottom in its place. That's what it's doing down there. So yep, this is normal stuff, just retention plates and locking plates to keep everything together and tight. But yeah, if you're not used to seeing it, like, did they hammer a washer? Kind of. They hammered a locking plate over that is designed to do this. How often can you reuse that locking plate? You can't. As soon as you take that thing loose, that entire plate has to be replaced. Figured you enjoyed this footage. Huge fan of the channel, by the way. From our last Cedar Point trip. What's this? Ooh, Siren's Curse action. Nice. Nice. Ooh, yeah, look at those locking pins work. Look at that. Nice. Oh, yeah. Nice. I like it. Let's look at that. Let's see if we can move this guy out of the way. Look at those little extension rods go up there. That's cool. These guys lock the bottom of the thing in there. Bottom of the track in place and hold it. And then right here you get the secondary unlocks from underneath. There it goes. That secondary's unlocked. A little back and forth there. And then the primary folds down. And then the claw unlocks. And it drops the train. Very nice. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. This next one, it says not their video, but it says it looks like corkscrew has valid. Let's see. Yep, that's a valid corkscrew right there. No fun. It's right at the end of the ride too. No fun. Almost made it back. Man. Now, did that happen recently? I'm not sure, because this was not their video. It was taken from I'm guessing it's probably a TikTok or something like that. I don't know who the originals is, but you never know the time frame on these things. This could have been taken from, heck, could have been taken a couple years ago. We don't know. Could have been a couple weeks ago. Yeah, unfortunately, when they valley, they always valley slow close to the end of the ride. It's like, oh, what a shame. Got to get out there, and then it's probably easiest. I'm guessing the end is right past here, if I think about that. I think it goes up this way and then makes a little dog leg back over there. But I would say the easiest thing to recover this would just to be getting some chain pulls and stuff like that and just pull this back up and over since it's so close to the end, if I'm thinking about the layout right on this thing. Let's see, this one is entitled Kumba Repairs. Close up of the repairs on Kumba. Anyone have any idea what those beams on the track spine are for? Coming to us from X. Ah, okay, this is Sacks on Tracks. Sacks on Tracks. Boy, that sounds dirty. Good job. Subscribe if you like that. Close up of the repairs on Kumba. Anyone have any idea what those beams on the track spine are for? Okay, so you got guys up there working. They've got welding leads pulled up there. 2 people. Yeah, that's a weld repairs. Okay, so if we look at this area right here, what they've got is they've got these 2 pieces you could see right there and kind of both ends. This is angle iron, which is just stock steel basically. They've got it welded to the top, to the track there, top to the track there, and then they've got 2 other pieces, one running horizontal right there, and the other one running horizontal right there. So what they've done is they've made basically kind of this like lazy L shape that has helped pin that rail right there. So I'm imagining, since this area right there is primer, I'm imagining what's happened is like a lot of these B&M rides do. They crack right where the rail meets that last tie, where the bolted flange is. So many of them crack right there. So many of them crack so many times that a lot of times they've gone through and actually cut part of the tie off and just welded the steel rail together. Now, B&M's no stranger to these cracks. It mainly happens on a lot of their old stuff. So there's tons of repairs out there sanctioning. It's not like they're doing anything new here. Rides crack apart. They do this type of stuff. So there's repairs for them. They're sanctioned repairs. It's not a big deal. So what they've done is they've probably had to open root and grind into there to where possibly the rail could have started to move and come loose. There's so much tension in these things that if that rail had come out of position, even just by a millimeter, it would have wrecked everything. It's extremely important that all that stuff stay together. So they either cut all the way through the rail or they got close to cutting through the rail where they were worried about it. So they took other pieces of steel and welded it to the structure just in case. You could use ratchet straps and come-alongs and all sorts of other stuff. All that stuff will move. There is so much stress wrapped up in these parts. So the best thing to do is simply just weld other components to it. That way you know it's really not going to move once it comes undone. Now, will it move? Yeah, it will move. Just slightly, but it'll move. One of the most dangerous things to do is to open up a coupling on a ride like that because they can spring apart and do lots of damage. But anyways, they're making a repair right here at that track joint. So they've welded on both sides, trying to hold the rails in the same spatial plane, the XYZ plane, so they don't go anywhere. I'm imagining it's probably right where the track tie itself joins to the tube of the rail. They typically crack right in there, and I've got pictures from other people where the part of the track tie itself was actually just cut off, because if you weld it 360 degrees around, you essentially don't need part of the track tie. You need half of it, but not the other half, if that makes sense, because it's welded on both sides. This is my 2 track ties where the bolted flange comes together like that. I've got my opening right there. So if I'm going to use this side of the track tie here, I can take this side completely off and then weld the rail all the way around and then just leave that one tie sitting there. It's acceptable. I've actually seen that repair done at a bunch of parks. But yep, that's what they're doing there. They're holding a rail in place while they're making a weld repair. Here's this one. This is interesting. Being a Disney fan myself. Big Thunder. Saw this article, maybe want to reach out to you. Scroll towards the bottom of the article. There's a photo of the envelope test. As you can see, it appears it came into contact with the rock structure. This is over here at blogmickey.com. Oh, look at that. Nice work bay train. Oh, look at that. Yeah. That's some nice stuff. Nice construction photos. Not what I'm looking for. Blog Mickey has some good stuff. I like their stuff. Yep. Lots of installation. I wonder if they're going to leave the track black. Kind of looks black. Maybe a dark... No, it looks black. Haven't put all the rail ties in there yet. The wooden cross ties that go on there. Oh, here's their little carrier sled for working inside of tunnels and stuff. They use this guy to basically carry parts, components, even other pieces of track further inside the tunnel so they don't have to deal with the overhead stuff. So that's why, if anyone's seen this and they're like, what is that thing? That's basically a working sled to carry things in there. And I believe that's probably stout enough to carry another section of track on top of it to work inside tunnels. Ah, here it is. So yeah, this is the clearance envelope test that they use to go around the ride. And as you can see right here on top, it's got a good 8 to 10 inches of interference on there that they're going to have to hack those rocks away and redo all the concrete work there to make it look whole again. Now that's interesting. That this is another part of the clearance envelope where they went by and they're like, all that had to come off of there. Looks really bad, but realistically that could have just been about a foot worth of space, because the rock structure, as you can see, it's not super thick. So it's more just facade than anything. So just a little bit of interference will essentially do that. Okay, so the question becomes why? Why does that happen? Not so much the track, although to beef up this spine and to make it a little beefier to where it can handle more stress for a new 15, 20 years to come, that spine changes a little bit. Obviously, when they go through and they redesign some of the elements and turns and stuff like that, it changes the shape of the track just slightly, and they might have had to make a choice to make it come up or move over one way or the other just ever so slightly to make the geometry work better. But realistically, and now I don't have any behind the scenes stuff with Disney here. I'm not tied in with them at all. But realistically, they're going to up the size of the train to accommodate larger guests on the ride. So the trains are going to get wider left to right to accommodate bigger people. And then they're probably going to get a little more lengthy, which might make a little bit of the chordal effect between coaches might be a little bit different. Won't affect much, but I'm guessing the train got a little wider to accommodate some larger people, and it also got a little further off the track, because when you make it wider to accommodate more weight, that means the spine of the train has to be beefier to carry that weight as well. So basically it just updid everything to make it a little more plus enabling to get people in those coaches, out of those coaches, maybe some ADA assistance and stuff like that. But I'm guessing they went out and up a little bit, and it basically caused some of the tight areas to have problems. Blog Mickey, though, check it out. Okay, the last one has a video, but I don't want to call people out in this video, so I'm not actually going to show this. But this is a worker from a park that contacted me, and they said, hey, They weren't the most thrilled that they popped up on a TikTok showing them doing a repair on a roller coaster. So they said, you know, what do I do about this? What did you do about this? Is there anything we can do about this? And so anytime you're out there working on a ride, you're working in the public eye. Everything you do is a direct representation of the company and the park you are working for. This is one of the main reasons why I don't say where I used to work. I don't say what company I used to work for, because I don't work for them. These are all my own opinions, my own everything now. I don't want anyone on this channel whatsoever to think that my opinions and my actions are part of my old park or my old company. I don't want that there. So that's why I don't bring it up. But one of the things you need to do is when you work in public, assume that you're always being watched and you're always being recorded. Now, those recordings can these days go onto, your YouTubes, TikToks, whatever it might be. They can go on to all sorts of social media platform, but they will also be that the social media platforms are the first source of energy to feed the news media when something bad happens. And they'll look through and they'll find footage of somebody doing something and try to twist the words around to make it seem like something happened that in reality it didn't happen. So one thing I always do is say, just act professional, always be calm, collective, courteous, act professional, be nice, never say anything mean, never get pissed off at people, try to keep a cool, level head while you're out there. If you're going to be doing something that is viewed as like, I don't want someone recording this, then don't give people that fuel for the fire. There is not much you can do when it comes to working on rides in full view of the public, but if you have to do something sensitive to the restraints. Now, typically, I don't tear restraints apart in front of people because the people waiting in line, it ruins their perception of safety. Even though I'm doing it for safety, I'm doing it for them to make sure. And even actually when I'm done working on that restraint, I am going to be the first one to ride that roller coaster in that restraint because I worked on it, so I test it out. It's not a big deal. I'm not actually testing it. I know it's safe, but I'm actually doing that for the guest perception because they don't know it's safe. So I go on a test ride first thing, go, wee, this is fun. Even some rides where I'm like, this is crap, but I'm like, hey, it's fun. Everyone's having fun. You have to be careful in some of those things when you do sensitive things. I have done things to trains and to restraints before where I did not want people watching me and recording me because I'm doing standard stuff. I'm taking stuff apart. I know what I'm doing, but I don't want other people posting it on social media saying, what's this guy doing? Oh, and then just saying whatever they want to about it because it could end up in a negative way. That's when I use my power words that everyone hates. Everyone hates these words when I say that. Every mechanic can do it. Operations doesn't like it. The people in line don't like it. I hate it when I hear it if I'm in line, and that is the phrase, clear the queue line. Clear the queue line means this is going to be a little bit, and I don't want people watching what I'm doing, so I want everybody gone. So I say, clear the queue line, and they kick everybody out of there. And then knowing that when I do that, it's probably going to take me over half an hour to 45 minutes to do whatever it is. So I say, clear the queue line, because I don't want people around when I'm doing something. It could be something minor. It could be something like I'm going to have to take a booster wheel off inside the station, which means I need to get a hydraulic puller out and a big 3-pound persuasion hammer out, and I'm going to start banging on the thing. It doesn't look good. Any mechanic that's changed booster wheels out, well, it's like, yeah, sometimes you got to beat on those things. Sometimes you do have to beat on those things. Guests don't like to see that. It doesn't look good at all. So I clear the station and get people out of there so they don't see what I'm doing. But always just try to, whatever you do it professionally. And if you need to beat on something and you're in full view of everybody else, then try to come up with a different way. Get a bunch of mechanics around or something to block the view of people so they can't see what you're doing. Like, try to put up some little shield of protection. If you're obvious about it, like I'm going to put up a tarp so they can't see what I'm doing, that causes people to focus even more on what you're doing. Try to be nonchalant about it. Like if you need to do something like I just need to pry and hit on this thing for a little bit, call 2 other mechanics over and say, hey, everyone crouch down with me while I do this and shield me from this view over here while I beat this thing off of there. That's my best advice. You're always being watched. You're always being recorded. Just be professional about it. And if you got something where you can't be professional about it, elevate it above you. Elevate it to your supervisor, to your manager, to the director, whoever it is, and just say, all right, I need to do this. It's going to look bad. What should I do? One thing I always hated doing was we had a kids roller coaster made by Zamperla, and every once in a while the brake ski would crack. We had repair procedures. We had everything we needed to just take it off, make the repair, and do it. But there was no genteel way about going into the middle of the park and taking a 6-foot-long brake ski off the ride, and then we had to carry it all the way back out of the park in full view of everybody. So I would try to go down there, and when we did it, I would try to put it in, like, wrap it in trash bags and stuff like that, and put it on a big dolly with other things on there to kind of just say, yeah, we don't have a broken component right here. We're doing other things. But I never liked removing parts of the ride in front of other people because the perception wasn't good. Again, everyone in this channel, hey, yeah, we know we're doing that for a reason, but everyone outside of this channel is just like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? This is a horrible place. But preaching to the choir here, I know. If you liked the video, let me know. Like, subscribe if you like it. Do all that stuff downstairs. Comment. Let me know if you got some good stories to add into some of this stuff as well. If you want to email me, go ahead and email me. It's very simple. It's all one word. It's ryantheridemechanic@yahoo.com. Easy email address. Just put it in there and you could send me off something. If you don't want something, if you share pictures and you don't want them shared, please state that. Because if, like, people send me pictures all the time, I typically ask if I could keep the pictures to use on future videos. But all the time, people send me stuff from, you know, behind the scenes and stuff like that, where they're like, absolutely not, you cannot do that. It's like, oh, cool. So I grab those pictures, I look at them, I'm like, wow, that's really cool. And then literally I just delete them, delete the whole email right there. It's like, psh, gone. Don't keep it. So try to keep that information safe. All right. That's it for this video.
Yeah.
Guards in the station behind the gates, please make sure you're not leaning on them and then take a step back from them for me, please.
Oh,
Stay off the air gates. Bye.
Guards in the station behind the gates, please make sure you're not leaning on them and then take a step back from them for me, please.
oh.